According to a number of studies with senior executives around the world, the most desirable attribute for a leader is the ability to think creatively. Now, one of the real issues is creativity learned or is it developed? And most of the evidence suggests that creativity can be learned to a degree, and some people are naturally more creative than others, but in very specific ways. The real mystery is that why the most intelligent people on the planet are not necessarily the most creative. What researchers suggest is the following: that highly intelligent people have never failed and have never had the experience that failure affords. So they don't really know how to get over something. And because creativity is about doing something that you've never done before in a new way, failure is part of the process. So when we look at companies that are created or we look at patents that are awarded, it's not necessarily the smartest people. So that should be good news to all of us that kind of everybody can create. Highly intelligent people, when they fail, often blame other people instead of making adjustments. So I'd like you to think about this like the parent at the playground. There's two kinds of parents. There's the parent that says, "Don't do that, don't do that," and the child never really gets any smarter because of the boundaries. And then there's the parent that said, "Hurt, didn't it? Hurt, didn't it?" Right? "Don't rub it till you get home." That child, because they have failed, because they've gone through the pain of the failure cycle, develops capabilities that the other child that was told not to do something never will. So as leaders, it's very important that we allow for failure in a limited context when we're trying to develop innovators in our organization. There are 5 levels of creativity that happen in different ways. The most basic level is called the mimetic level, and that means to imitate. So if you think about the easiest way to create is you imitate somebody else. The second level is called bisociative, and this is why brainstorming works. You combine 2 ideas, an idea that you're familiar with an idea that you're not familiar with, and it creates a new idea. The third level is called analogical, and that means you're making an analogy or a metaphor. And what analogies and metaphors do is they cluster ideas together, and they're either ideas that we're familiar with that we want to make unfamiliar or defamiliarize, or they're ideas that we're unfamiliar with and we want to make familiar. So for example, we might say drinking this new soda is like jumping into a cold swimming pool on a hot day. That makes the connection for us. The fourth level is the narratological level, and that's our ability to tell stories. And stories have a lot of characters and a lot of plot and a lot of settings that are involved. And if you've ever heard a child try and tell a story, it's very complicated to put things together. But this is essential if we're trying to build a complicated solution or a strategy, which is essentially an involved story. Now, the final level is what we're going to call the transcendental level or the intuitive level. And this level is where creativity is maybe happening in a way that's not rational or not cognitive. Maybe we believe we're getting inspiration from somewhere else, or maybe we believe that our ideas are connecting in to larger ideas of the age. But in order to access this kind of creativity, we might need to learn to meditate or to do yoga or some other practice that takes us out of our rational thinking. Creativity happens in a diamond form. There's an etiquette or a particular type of guideline you want to follow, and it goes like this. When you start, you want to be highly divergent. You want lots of ideas, very little judgment. You want to include even strange ideas because they're going to create points of departure. You want people not only to talk but to draw and to use their hands and maybe act things out. You want to build prototypes. You're trying to create a great width of ideas. Now, the second part of the creative process is to converge. And this means that from this great width, you're going to come up with the best ideas. And in this convergent part, you're going to be more judgmental. You're going to have a criteria. You're going to be more discerning. You're going to think about things like feasibility and time and cost. Here's the key. You never want to start by converging, because what that will do is it will limit the range of creative ideas that you have. In other words, it will make them incremental and ordinary. So first you have to allow people to be a little bit crazy before you can decide which ideas are really best suited to create a winning solution. Our brains are naturally creative. When we're introduced to new information, our brain can do two things. One, it can assimilate it into the structures it already has. The second thing it can do is it can accommodate it by building new structures. One of the ways in which we can fool our brain into being creative is called defamiliarization. And all we need to do is take an idea that we know in a setting that we know and connect it to an idea that we normally don't. And we can do this in a couple ways. One, you could simply take an idea and open a book to any page and point to a word, and the random connection would give you an opportunity to brainstorm how these two words might go together. The other way is to have a formal list of words and simply take an idea and try and connect it to some of the words on that list. This will generate a whole series of new ideas. Another way to connect random words is to organize words by certain types of activities. In the 1950s, there was a famous advertising executive named Alex Osborne, and he came up with an acronym, a simple mnemonic device to remember how to connect your idea to an action-oriented idea. And he called this Scamper. To Scamper, all you have to do is take your idea and ask what would happen if you substituted an idea for your idea, if you combined your idea with another idea, if you adapted your idea with another idea, if you magnified or minified your idea, if you put it to another use, if you eliminated your idea or maybe reversed your idea. S-C-A-M-P-E-R. By scampering, we take an idea that we're familiar with, we add action to it, and we generate a whole host of new ideas. One of the functions of our mind is to make metaphors and analogies. And what metaphors and analogies do is they connect things that we're familiar with to things that we're unfamiliar with. The Greeks called this syndetic thinking. Now, in order to make creativity work with syndetic thinking, we have to take a few steps. The first is we have to identify a challenge or an opportunity. And we have to get below the challenge or the opportunity to what's really making it a challenge or an opportunity. Sometimes this is called the root cause. So let's practice some syndetic thinking. Let's take an opportunity such as starting a new restaurant. Well, in most cities there's a lot of restaurants, so somehow we're going to have to distinguish ourselves and be unique. So let's say we're now going to connect our idea of a new restaurant and go on an excursion analogy and connect it to an idea such as a beehive. So in a beehive we're going to have bees and a structure and ways the bees come in and out of the hive. There's going to be beeswax, they're going to be making honey, and so on and so forth. So now let's apply that to our new restaurant. Maybe in our new restaurant the chef isn't cooking, maybe the bees are cooking, the people who come to the restaurant. Maybe the bees are making honey or putting a little bit of their own character into what they're making. So maybe it's like a salad bar or a Mongolian barbecue where there's some kind of participation by the people who come to the restaurant. And maybe the wax is that something is malleable in the restaurant. Maybe the tables move, maybe the cuisine changes. Finally, we're going to take these ideas and we're going to combine them into a solution. So maybe the name of our restaurant is the Bees Hive. Maybe our cuisine is some kind of a unique mashup that the people who come to our restaurant make. So that by taking our basic idea, a restaurant, and connecting that to an analogy like a beehive, we come up with a new type of solution that not only has new ideas, it's integrated into something that is truly functional. So now we have a lot of creative ideas. How do we decide what to do first? Well, that's easy. You want to look at ideas that have a big payoff, and you want to look at ideas that are easy to implement. These ideas are big wins. They're easy to do, they're low-hanging fruit. Next, you want to look for ideas that are easy to implement, but basically don't have a big payoff. They have a small payoff, and we're going to call these small wins. You want to have a lot of small wins because they develop momentum, and they also develop capability in your team. Now, some ideas are very hard to implement, but they do have a big payoff. We're going to call these special cases. You should never have more than a couple of these because a lot of things can go wrong in terms of cost, money, and they take a long time and a lot of energy to do. Most importantly, you're going to have a lot of ideas that are very hard to implement, and they really don't pay off very well. We're going to call these time wasters, and at least a quarter to a third of your ideas should be put in the time waster category. We should get rid of them because they're going to create the time and resources necessary for us to work on the big wins and on the small wins. So now, let's apply prismatic thinking to creative thinking. When are you most creative? And where are you most creative? How do you create? What are your methods? What creative practices does your organization support? Which ones does it reward? In this segment, we're going to talk about gaining buy-in for your breakthrough idea. Now, the first thing you have to understand is the more innovative